In the first part of the Chinese Grand Prix, the two Ferrari SF-24 cars were limited by their grid position and the dynamics that took place at the start. Max Verstappen pulled away, creating an immediate safety gap from the group behind. After a few laps, the pit crew notified him that the temperatures of the compound had stabilized. On the other hand, the Ferrari cars had a terrible start, allowing the Mercedes of George Russell and also the Haas of Nico Hulkenberg to overtake both Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc in the first corner. In the following laps, they implemented some tire management on the medium compound. The Maranello pit wall suggested a less aggressive approach to turn 1, where several seconds are spent in support. These instructions were given in order to prevent graining on the front end. There was also talk of Plan B over the team radio, which could have been a strategy with a single pit stop, trying to go longer on the medium tires in the first sting, and later switching to the Pirelli hard tires for the second part of the race. Plan D was also mentioned in the radio discussions, but only Ferrari knows what that referred to. The first of the leading group to pit was Fernando Alonso, who switched to hards on lap 10. The Spanish driver did not feel comfortable on the mediums, and his Aston Martin generally lacked pace at the 5.451-kilometer Shanghai International Circuit. But his impressive driving abilities and race management once again allowed him to get the most out of the car's limited potential. Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez both pitted on lap 13 to switch to hards. They also did some tire management in the following laps, with Max Verstappen's Red Bull engineer Jean-Pierre Lambiase telling the Dutchman to control and contain some of the slip in turn 7. In other words, he needed to better control the degree of the car's sliding to manage tire degradation. Carlos Sainz switched to hards on lap 17, which turned out not to be the ideal as the Spaniard could not take advantage of events on track a few laps later. Indeed, on lap 20, Valtteri Bottas stopped at the side of the track, and just the next lap, a virtual safety car was deployed. Charles Leclerc took great advantage of this virtual safety car moment, pitting and losing much less race time. Lando Norris, at the time the virtual safety car was confirmed, had stayed out. Fortunately for the McLaren team, this period remained active for a long time as the marshals struggled to remove the stricken car of Valtteri Bottas, allowing the Englishman to pit on the next lap. Shortly after, a full safety car regime was deployed, and many took advantage of it. Notably, the two Red Bull cars came in to fit fresh hard tires and aimed directly for the finish. Fernando Alonso came in again for the soft compound, while Mercedes took the opportunity to switch George Russell to the white-banded Pirelli tires. From the chart related to the gaps, we can observe some dynamics on the Shanghai track. Firstly, it's evident how Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris were on similar times towards the end of their stint. However, there was a significant gap between the two, mainly due to the Monegasque driver starting from a disadvantaged position on the grid and not having a perfect first lap, which made matters even worse. The Ferrari drivers therefore made the race more complicated for themselves. By pitting earlier, the two Red Bull cars had excellent pace, allowing them to recover a lot of race time on Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc. The Milton Keynes cars showed overall very good performance on the medium compound, C3, despite the fact that Sergio Perez couldn't find the correct balance with this tire. That's why they made many adjustments as compared to the sprint event which took place on Saturday morning. The driver from Guadalajara once again struggled against Max Verstappen. His RB20 was sliding at the rear, and in general, didn't have the same grip as his teammate. Lando Norris managed the yellow tire well, containing the degradation at the rear that was seen during the sprint race. Throughout the Chinese Grand Prix weekend, McLaren had an oversteering car, and generally suffered from rear overheating. However, between Saturday and Sunday, they worked a lot on this front, and the track conditions favored the MCL38. Scuderia Ferrari on the medium compound was just a tenth behind Lando Norris's McLaren, without considering all the overtakes the Maranello team's drivers had to make in the first part of the stint. Starting further forward could have resulted in less race time lost, finding more pace with the medium tires, which means the SF-24 car was in fact slightly faster than the McLaren MCL38 on the medium tires. Right from the restart under the safety car, there were several complications for the prancing horse cars. Following the safety car, they couldn't warm up the tires sufficiently. Finding pace with the hard tire was therefore really difficult for both drivers. From the Maranello pit wall, they advised Charles Leclerc to avoid the so-called micro-locks, which are small lockups that, however, trouble the tire over the long run. Also, at turn 7, Charles Leclerc's race engineer, Xavier Marcos Padros, asked for more tire management from the Monegasque driver, with several instructions regarding racing lines as well, even one that led to a worrying miscommunication between the Ferrari driver and his race engineer in the final stages of the Chinese Grand Prix, which we will enlarge upon in a future video. Ferrari team principal Frederic Vasseur refused to blame the track conditions at the Chinese Grand Prix for the Maranello team's lack of performance in the race on Sunday. Ahead of Formula One's return to Shanghai, the track surface was coated in a layer of bitumen, which tire supplier Pirelli later indicated it was unaware of. In the race, Charles Leclerc had to settle for 4th place with Charles Leclerc and 5th place for Carlos Sainz, but the driver struggled on the hard compound tires. Whilst the French manager indicated that the track surface was a problem, he refused to use it as the sole excuse for Ferrari's rather disappointing performance at the Shanghai International Circuit. In the restarted race after the safety cars, Charles Leclerc was running 3rd behind McLaren's Lando Norris, yet the Monegasque driver was unable to keep up with the Briton, finishing 9.9s behind. But Frederic Vasseur expressed that he perceived the gap to be extremely narrow among the leading group, stating that on any given weekend, the Maranello team could fluctuate between being considered successful or unsuccessful. He explained that from the start of the season, there exists a situation where the competition is very intense. When asked by the media if he believed the team would have outperformed McLaren if it weren't a sprint weekend, he responded affirmatively. He elaborated, mentioning that while Max Verstappen may occasionally demonstrate slightly superior speed, there is a group of 6 or 7 cars within a tenth of a second. In qualifying, there was only a small margin, approximately a tenth to a tenth and a half, between positions 2 to 3 and positions 8 to 9. It was actually 0.315 seconds between Sergio Perez in 2nd and Carlos Sainz in 7th. At the same time, Frederic Vasseur emphasized that such a tight competition implies that minor details can greatly affect performance over a race weekend, shifting a team's outcome from success to failure. The French manager noted the challenges faced when starting from the 9th position, where encountering turbulent air during the initial lap makes overtaking difficult. Even if the car is faster, overtaking becomes challenging due to the risk of damaging the tires when not having a significant gap. The Ferrari team principal acknowledged that achieving success requires flawless execution, recognizing that his team did not have a seamless weekend and collectively made too many errors in this 5th round of the 2024 Formula One Championship. He concluded by stating that the team understands that only a perfect performance will secure them a place at the front, but they remain determined to try again in the next race.